Hello, my friend. Tonight, before the world grows quiet and your thoughts drift towards sleep, I want to invite you into a story about something so ordinary you rarely notice it, and yet so powerful it shapes the very course of your life. It's not fate, it's not luck, it's not even talent. It's something smaller, subtler, and infinitely more persistent. Habit. Think of the first thing you did this morning. Did you reach for your phone before your eyes were fully open? Did you brush your teeth with the same hand, in the same rhythm, without thinking? Did you brew your coffee on autopilot, only realizing you'd already taken the first sip after the taste lingered on your tongue? Those weren't conscious decisions. They were loops you've run so many times your brain performs them almost without you. Habits are the invisible script of our days. Charles Duhigg begins his exploration of this hidden power with a simple question. What if our habits, those small automatic behaviors we barely notice, are the true engines of our lives? What if success, happiness, health, even freedom itself, depend less on the massive choices we make once in a while, and more on the tiny decisions we repeat every day? The answer is not just theory. Science now shows us that habits are etched into our brains, like grooves on a record. They run whether we notice or not. And once a habit is formed, it never really disappears. Instead, it lies dormant, waiting for a cue, waiting for a spark. This is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying, because it means the bad habits we thought we'd outgrown, the late-night snacking, the procrastination, the self-doubt, can reappear when life shakes us. Liberating, because it also means that good habits, once planted, are always within reach, even if neglected for years. Imagine standing in front of two doors. Behind one is the life you currently live, the routines that guide your morning, the rituals that shape your relationships, the unconscious rhythms that make you who you are today. Behind the other doors, the life you dream of living, healthier, calmer, more focused, more present. The only difference between the two? The set of habits you choose to nurture. But here's the paradox. We often believe that change comes from grand resolutions. The dramatic Monday when we decide to become a new person. The new year when we promise a total reinvention. Yet time and again, we fall back into the same old loops. We promise to quit smoking, then reach for a cigarette when stress rises. We vow to save money, then swipe our card at the first flash sale. It feels like our willpower isn't strong enough. But Duhigg shows us that the problem isn't our strength. It's our strategy. Habits aren't broken. They're replaced. They aren't destroyed. They're reshaped. The brain doesn't erase old pathways. It simply learns new ones and begins to favor them when the right cues appear. This means we don't need to fight ourselves endlessly. We need to redesign the loop. Consider this. Every habit is a story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning is the trigger. The smell of popcorn at the theater, the buzz of your phone on the table, the afternoon slump when your energy dips. The middle is the routine, the action you take almost without thinking, whether it's buying the popcorn, checking the notification, or reaching for a soda. The end is the reward, the burst of flavor, the rush of connection, the jolt of sugar and caffeine. Your brain remembers that loop. It learns that when it sees the cue, it should crave the reward, and so it drives you into the routine. Over time, the decision disappears. You no longer ask, "Should I?" You simply do it. Now pause and ask yourself, how many of your days are built on loops you didn't consciously choose? How many of your mornings, your evenings, your moments of stress are controlled not by your intention, but by grooves laid down long ago? The truth can sting, but it's also the doorway to change. Because if habits are built by loops, then breaking free isn't about force of will. It's about learning the language of the loop and teaching your brain a new story. This is where the journey begins. Tonight, as you listen, I invite you to imagine your life as a series of patterns woven together. Some of those patterns hold you back, others quietly lift you forward. The power of habit is not about perfection, but about awareness. And once you see the invisible strings pulling at you, you can decide whether to cut them or to weave them into something stronger. You close your eyes and picture an old machine, gears turning in silence. At first it looks chaotic, a tangle of wheels and cogs, but then you notice a rhythm. Each tooth interlocks with another, each motion setting off the next. This is the habit loop, the hidden engine inside your brain. And once you understand it, the fog of mystery around your own behaviors begins to lift. The loop has three parts: the cue, the routine, the reward. Simple words, but together they form the architecture of our days. Imagine you're sitting at your desk, the afternoon sun slanting across your keyboard. You feel a flicker of fatigue, a shadow of boredom. That's the cue. Without thinking, you reach for your phone, open your favorite app, scroll for a few minutes. That's the routine. A small rush of novelty, a brief spark of amusement, fills you with a sense of relief. That's the reward. Your brain takes note. This worked. Do it again next time. Neuroscientists discovered this pattern by studying rats in mazes. At first, the rats would sniff and scratch around, confused. But as the experiment repeated, they began to race through with efficiency. Their brains showed a spike of activity at the start, then a lull as the routine took over, then another spike at the end when they reached the reward, a piece of chocolate. The in-between, the actual wandering, was nearly automatic. The brain had turned the process into a script, freeing mental energy for other tasks. Now translate that into human life. When you drive to work, how often do you remember the details of the journey? The turns, the lights, the lane changes? Most days, you arrive and realize you barely noticed the trip at all. Your mind was elsewhere. That's the power and danger of the loop. It allows your brain to run on autopilot, helpful when brushing your teeth, harmful when the loop is smoking a cigarette every time you feel stress. The loop is neutral, like a machine. It doesn't care whether the routine is good or bad. It only cares about efficiency. Once the pattern is etched, the brain steps back and lets the loop run. That's why habits feel so stubborn. It's not because you lack discipline. It's because your mind has locked onto a sequence it believes saves effort. Picture your life as a book, where every page has faint lines already printed on it. You can write your own words, but if you aren't paying attention, you'll just trace the lines that are already there. That's what habits do. They give you the illusion of choice while gently steering your hand across the page in familiar strokes. But here's the revelation. If you can identify the cue and the reward, you can begin to change the routine. You don't erase the loop, you rewire it. The key is not to fight the craving, but to harness it, to attach it to something healthier, something that moves you closer to who you want to be. A man named Eugene, studied by researchers, proved this in a surprising way. After a brain infection destroyed his ability to form new memories, he couldn't remember where his kitchen was or recognize his own daughter. Yet every morning, he'd rise from bed, walk to the kitchen, open the cabinet, and eat breakfast. He couldn't explain how. His brain, stripped of recent memory, still clung to the habit loop buried deep inside. He had lost himself, and yet his routines kept him alive. That story reveals a sobering truth. Habits live in the oldest parts of our brain, the basal ganglia, a place that keeps running even when memory fails. That is why they are so enduring. It is also why, with awareness, we can rely on them as powerful allies. So tonight, as you trace the loops of your own day, notice the cues that trigger you. The phone buzz, the smell of food, the stress before a meeting. Notice the routines you slip into, almost unconsciously. And most of all, notice the rewards your brain is chasing, the relief, the pleasure, the sense of control. because once you see those three gears turning, you hold the blueprint to change. You begin to notice that habits are not just about the surface act. Beneath the routine lies something deeper, more primal, more magnetic. It is craving. The brain doesn't merely remember a cue. It starts to anticipate the reward, to hunger for it before it arrives. That hunger is what gives the loop its power. Imagine walking past a bakery. The golden crust of bread glistens in the window, but what grips you is not the sight itself. It is the thought of what will happen after. The warmth in your mouth, the soft sweetness melting on your tongue, the comfort of being full. That expectation, that silent whisper of satisfaction, is the craving. The cue sparks it, the routine satisfies it, and the reward seals the loop. Scientists once ran an experiment with monkeys, teaching them to pull a lever whenever they saw a shape on a screen. At first, the monkeys were clumsy, unsure why they should bother. But when pulling the lever released a drop of juice, something remarkable occurred. Their brains began firing not when the juice hit their tongues, but the instant they saw the shape on the screen. The craving had shifted backward, attaching itself to the cue. From then on, resisting the urge was almost impossible. This is why some habits feel irresistible. It's not the cigarette that hooks you, it's the anticipation of relief from stress. It's not the soda that enslaves you, it's the spark of sugar your body has learned to crave the moment you hear the can crack open. Craving is the engine, and once it's in motion, the body and mind will bend to satisfy it. But cravings can also save us. Picture a hospital where nurses wash their hands dozens of times a day. It's easy to forget or cut corners. Yet in one medical ward, infection rates dropped dramatically. The secret wasn't stricter rules or harsher punishments. It was a simple change: placing soap dispensers in more visible places and rewarding staff with compliments and small recognition when they used them. Suddenly, washing hands became a habit, powered by a craving not for soap, but for praise, for belonging, for the small rush of doing the right thing and being seen. Craving is not the enemy. It is energy, waiting to be guided. The trick is to identify what your brain is truly longing for. When you snack at midnight, is it really hunger? Or is it comfort, distraction, a break from loneliness? When you check your phone every 2 minutes, is it the information you crave or the feeling of connection? Charles Duhigg shows us that to change a habit, we don't need to erase craving. We need to reattach it. If you crave comfort, perhaps a cup of tea and a short walk can give it to you without the guilt. If you crave connection, maybe a brief conversation with a friend can replace the endless scroll. The cue stays. The craving remains. But the routine, that's where your freedom lies. And so, as you drift deeper into this story, you begin to sense that your life isn't controlled by an invisible enemy, but by a powerful force waiting to be reclaimed. Craving is a compass. If you learn to read it, you can turn it from a chain into a guide, from a prison into a path. Some habits are small, like brushing your teeth or tying your shoes. Others are seismic, like keystones in an arch. Remove one, and the entire structure shifts. Charles Duhigg calls them keystone habits, patterns that, once changed, ripple outward, altering everything they touch. Picture a stone cathedral. The arch above you looks impossibly heavy, yet it stands tall, stable, strong. At its center is a single wedge-shaped stone, the keystone. Without it, the entire arch would collapse. With it, every piece locks into place. That is how keystone habits work. Change them, and you don't just change one behavior. You unlock a cascade of transformations that reshape your life. Think of the simple act of exercising. At first, it is just 30 minutes of running or lifting weights. But soon, people who start exercising often begin eating better because their bodies crave cleaner fuel. They sleep more soundly because fatigue pulls them toward rest. They become more productive at work because discipline in one corner spills over into others. Exercise becomes a keystone. It doesn't just improve fitness, it rewrites identity. You stop being a person who occasionally works out, and you start being someone who is active. The same pattern appears in companies. When Paul O'Neill became the CEO of Alcoa, the aluminum giant, he stunned investors by announcing his top priority: not profits, not expansion, not market dominance, safety. He vowed that Alcoa would become the safest company in America. At first, shareholders panicked, but as workers focused on safety, they began noticing inefficiencies in equipment, communication, and management. Fixing safety meant fixing processes, and as those processes improved, so did productivity, morale, and eventually, profits. Safety was the keystone that unlocked hidden potential. Keystone habits matter because they create small wins, and small wins create momentum. Success is rarely a single leap. It is a series of steps, each one building confidence for the next. A person who makes their bed each morning may seem to be doing something trivial, but that simple act can trigger a mindset of order, accomplishment, and readiness that colors the entire day. Keystone habits also change how we see ourselves. They create a new narrative. A smoker who replaces cigarettes with running begins to think of themselves as an athlete rather than an addict. A student who commits to daily study not only learns more but starts to believe, I am disciplined. I am capable. Our brains seek consistency between what we do and who we think we are. Change the habit, and identity follows. Now consider your own life. What is the keystone that holds your current arch together? Maybe it is the nightly drink that eases stress but quietly frays your health. Maybe it is the morning run that steadies your mind for the day ahead. Which stone, if shifted, would change the shape of everything else? This realization carries weight, because it means transformation doesn't require a war on every bad habit. You don't need to rebuild your entire life in a single stroke. You need only find the keystone, the one behavior that pulls the others into line. Like moving the central stone in an arch, the rest begins to rearrange itself. As you let this thought sink in, you feel a sense of possibility. The maze no longer feels endless. The loops no longer feel invisible. There is a doorway, a hinge, a keystone waiting for you to press against it. And when you do, the architecture of your life will shift. There comes a moment in every attempt to change when the world seems to push back. You wake determined to start anew, to walk past the old triggers, to choose the better routine. And maybe for a day or two, you succeed. But then stress returns. Fatigue creeps in. Temptation whispers. And just like that, the old loop reclaims you. It feels like failure. But Charles Duhigg reminds us it is something else, a test of belief. Belief is the hidden ingredient in the science of habits. Without it, new routines crumble under pressure. With it, even the fiercest cravings can be reshaped. But belief is not born in silence. It is grown, nurtured, strengthened by something larger than the individual. Picture a man sitting in a church basement, surrounded by strangers who share his struggle with alcohol. At first, he resists the rituals, the prayers, the stories. Yet slowly, he notices that belief is contagious. Hearing another man confess his battles, watching a woman celebrate a year of sobriety, he begins to believe too, not just in his own willpower, but in the possibility of change itself. That flicker of faith, however fragile, gives his new routine strength when stress returns. Belief is what turns discipline into endurance. It transforms "I must" into "I can." It does not need to be religious. It can be belief in a community, in a mentor, in the future self you dream of becoming. But without belief, habits remain brittle, easily shattered by the first storm. Think of a runner training for a marathon. On a sunny day, with music pumping in their ears, running feels effortless. But on a cold morning, when rain lashes the windows, the habit faces its trial. The difference between giving in and lacing up often comes down to belief, the quiet conviction that this small act matters, that it is a step toward a larger self. Duhigg shares stories of companies that leaned on belief as well. When a football team turned around its losing streak, it wasn't simply because the coach redesigned plays. It was because he taught his players to believe in one another, to trust the system even when the scoreboard screamed failure. That belief created resilience, and resilience made new habits stick. Belief is what allows us to keep walking when the maze gets dark. It is the lantern we carry, the flame that doesn't extinguish when the old cravings return. Without it, change is a fragile promise. With it, change becomes a story we can endure, even when the plot twists. So ask yourself, as you listen tonight, what do you believe about your own capacity to change? Do you believe you are chained forever to your old routines? Or do you believe there is a stronger version of you waiting on the other side? Your answer is not abstract. It is the soil in which every new habit must root itself. And like a seed, it only grows when you believe it can. Now the camera widens. The story is no longer just about you, or me, or the quiet struggles of a single person. It is about entire organizations, vast machines with thousands of moving parts, and how their fate often rests not on bold strategies or visionary speeches, but on the invisible habits that pulse beneath the surface. Picture a massive company, skyscrapers of glass, boardrooms with polished tables, workers in hard hats walking factory floors. To an outsider, it looks like a fortress of efficiency. But step inside, and you will find something else: routines. The way meetings always start with the same ritual. The unspoken rules of who speaks first and who stays silent. The shortcuts workers take when no one is looking. These are not accidents. They are habits, ingrained into the culture, repeated so often that they feel natural, and they can determine whether a company thrives or crumbles. Duhigg tells us about a Rhode Island hospital where infection rates spiraled out of control. Patients arrived for surgery and left with deadly illnesses. New rules were written, posters plastered on the walls, but nothing changed. Then the staff shifted the habits of communication. Nurses were empowered to speak up if doctors skipped washing their hands. A culture of accountability began to take root. Over time, infections dropped dramatically, not because the hospital had more resources, but because its daily habits evolved. Think of it like a river carving its path through stone. At first, the current is weak, but as the water keeps flowing, the channel deepens until it becomes the only way forward. In companies, the current is culture, the habits of leaders, the rituals of teams, the small practices that, repeated endlessly, carve the future of the entire organization. Sometimes leaders understand this instinctively. Paul O'Neill at Alcoa didn't just care about safety because of injuries, though those were real and tragic. He understood that safety was a keystone habit. By demanding that every accident be reported, by insisting managers listen to workers' concerns, he rewired the company's routines. And with that new loop in place, everything from productivity to morale to profits improved. But when habits go wrong, the consequences can be devastating. Duhigg recalls how a company like Starbucks discovered that when employees faced angry customers, many would simply shut down or lash out. The organization realized it needed to build habits of willpower and calm. They trained baristas not with lectures, but with routines. If a customer yells, then take a deep breath, smile, and offer a free drink. The cue remained the same, an upset customer, but the routine was reshaped. The result was a culture of resilience, one cup at a time. As you drift with this story, you begin to realize that the same truth applies in families, in schools, in any group of humans. Our collective lives are nothing more than networks of loops, patterns of response passed from one person to another. Change a single habit, and you can shift the current of an entire community. Ignore them, and the river carves a canyon you may one day find impossible to escape. Habits are not just personal, they are social, they are cultural, they are the unseen choreography of human groups, dancing the same steps over and over until someone dares to teach a new rhythm, to teach a new rhythm, to teach a new rhythm, to teach a... You have heard the word before, whispered like a command: willpower. It is the quality we envy in others, the muscle we believe we lack when we break our own promises. But Charles Duhigg shows us that willpower is not an infinite well or a magical trait. It is more like a muscle in your body. It can grow stronger with use, but it can also tire, weaken, and fail if pushed too far. Imagine holding a heavy weight at arm's length. At first, you feel steady, confident, capable. But minute by minute, the muscles tremble, the strength drains, and eventually, your arm drops. Willpower works the same way. Every decision you make, every temptation you resist, every time you force yourself to sit still or stay polite, you are spending from the same reservoir, and by the end of the day, that reservoir can run dry. Researchers tested this with a simple experiment. Two groups of people were placed in a room. One group was offered warm cookies, the other only a bowl of radishes. The cookie group could indulge freely. The radish group had to resist. Later, both groups were given an impossible puzzle to solve. The cookie eaters worked for nearly 20 minutes before giving up. The radish eaters quit after just 8 minutes. Their willpower had already been drained by the act of saying no to temptation. But here's the hopeful truth. Like a muscle, willpower can be trained. In one study, people who practiced small acts of self-control, keeping good posture, writing down every expense, or forcing themselves to use their non-dominant hand, slowly built more stamina. Over time, they were better at resisting bigger temptations, like junk food or procrastination. Each small act was like a push-up for the brain, strengthening their capacity to endure. Think of a barista at Starbucks. The company discovered that their employees were quitting in frustration because of angry customers. Rather than lecturing them on staying strong, Starbucks gave them scripts, pre-written routines. When a customer yelled, the cue was stress. The routine was to take a breath, smile, and offer a coupon. This was willpower on autopilot. By transforming self-control into habit, workers no longer needed to summon endless reserves of discipline. The loop carried them through. The lesson is clear. Willpower is not about gritting your teeth forever. It is about designing your life so that self-control becomes automatic. If you want to save money, don't rely on constant restraint. Set up automatic transfers. If you want to eat better, don't trust your mood after a long day. Stock your fridge with healthy food, so the choice is already made. And yet, willpower is more than mechanics. It is also a story we tell ourselves about who we are. A person who believes, I am disciplined, I finish what I start, finds strength even when tired. A person who whispers, I always fail, collapses more quickly. The muscle of willpower is strengthened not only by practice, but by identity, by the belief that each repetition is proof of who we are becoming. As you lie there tonight, listening, consider this. Every time you resist the small urge to quit, you are training yourself for the larger battles. Every time you hold the weight a little longer, you expand your capacity to hold even more tomorrow. Willpower is not a gift for the lucky few. It is a skill, a muscle, a habit you can build. One choice, one moment, one quiet victory at a time. Look around you, not just at your own life, but at the lives intertwined with yours. Notice how often your choices are not truly your own. You laugh because your friends laugh. You yawn because someone else does. You clap because the crowd claps. This is not weakness. It is the architecture of being human. We are wired to mirror, to belong, to move in rhythm with others. And so, our habits are not only personal, they are social. Charles Duhigg calls them social habits, the hidden glue that binds communities, workplaces, and entire movements together. Think of how churches, sports teams, and neighborhoods create rituals that pull people into a shared identity. Sunday services, pre-game chants, neighborhood block parties. Each one begins as a simple routine, but soon becomes more than an act. It becomes a declaration. This is who we are. This is how we live. Consider the Montgomery bus boycott. It began with one woman, Rosa Parks, refusing to surrender her seat. But her act alone could have faded into silence if not for the habits of the community around her. People were already used to gathering at church, already used to walking together, already accustomed to supporting one another in hardship. When Parks was arrested, those habits of unity came alive. Carpools formed, meetings filled with voices, buses rolled through empty streets. What looked like a sudden spark was, in truth, the ignition of patterns that had been laid down for years. Social habits also shape us in more subtle ways. A man who wants to quit smoking often fails when he tries alone. But put him in a group of others on the same journey, and something shifts. The craving for nicotine remains, but now it is balanced by a stronger craving. To belong, to be accepted, to not disappoint those who walk beside him. The group becomes the reward. The cue may be the same: stress, boredom, routine, but the new loop is powered by connection instead of isolation. Even in the world of business, social habits matter. Duhigg describes how successful companies build cultures where employees instinctively help one another, share information, and rally around common goals. These aren't just policies written in manuals. They are habits: the morning check-in, the ritual of thanking a colleague, the unspoken rule that no one leaves until the job is done. Over time, those routines shape loyalty, trust, and identity far more powerfully than slogans or memos ever could. Social habits reveal a deeper truth. We are not just individuals battling cravings in private. We are part of tribes, and tribes amplify behavior. They can push us toward darkness, as in mobs, gangs, or addictions shared among friends, or they can pull us toward light, as in movements for justice, families that encourage growth, teams that lift one another higher. So as you breathe slowly, listening now, ask yourself, who are the people around you? What habits do you share without even noticing? Do your communities nudge you toward strength or toward weakness? Every tribe is a mirror, and every mirror shapes the person you see reflected back. When we understand this, a new possibility opens. Change no longer feels like a lonely struggle. It becomes a shared dance. You do not have to muscle through habits alone. You can step into the rhythm of a group that practices the life you want. And soon, without effort, your feet will follow. The hardest truth to face is this: habits never really die. They wait. They sleep in the folds of your memory, ready to awaken the instant the right cue appears. A man who hasn't smoked in a decade can smell tobacco at a party and suddenly feel the itch in his throat, the phantom comfort of smoke filling his lungs. A woman who conquered late-night snacking can walk past a glowing vending machine on a lonely evening and feel the pull of sugar calling her name. The old loop is still there. The groove carved into the brain does not vanish. At first, this realization feels crushing. You want to believe that once you've broken free, the past can't touch you. But Duhigg shows us a different way of seeing it. If you cannot erase habits, you can still reshape them. The secret is to keep the cue and the reward, but change the routine in between. Imagine a worker who buys a cookie every afternoon at the company cafeteria. He tells himself it is about hunger, but when researchers observe him, they notice something else. He isn't savoring the taste of the cookie. He's chatting with friends, laughing, enjoying a few minutes of connection. The reward he craves isn't sugar. It's companionship. Once he understands that, he experiments. When the clock strikes 3, instead of buying a cookie, he walks to a coworker's desk and talks. The cue remains the same. The reward, connection, is still satisfied, but the routine has been rewritten. Slowly, the old loop loses its grip. This is the golden rule of habit change. You cannot extinguish a bad habit. You can only replace it. The loop will always demand closure, but you decide what fills the space between cue and reward. Replace smoking with deep breathing. Replace procrastination with a 5-minute start. Replace gossip with gratitude. The craving will pull you forward, but you can guide where it leads. It is like redirecting a river. You cannot stop water from flowing, but you can carve a new channel, guide it into a healthier path. At first, the old canyon still exists, wide and deep. But as the water pours through the new channel, the old one begins to dry. The grooves never vanish completely, but they lose their power as long as the current flows elsewhere. This is why awareness is everything. Without it, you are trapped in a maze you don't even see, running the same loops forever. With awareness, you become the architect of your own pathways. You begin to notice, here comes the cue, here comes the craving. Now I have a choice. And that choice, repeated again and again, becomes the foundation of a new identity. Change is not about erasing who you were. It is about rewriting the script, one routine at a time, until the story of your life points in a new direction. Each time you choose the new path, you are voting for the person you want to be. Each time you resist the old loop, you weaken its hold. And each time you claim the reward through a different action, you remind your brain, this is the story now. This is who I am becoming. At last, we come to the heart of it all. Identity. For behind every habit, behind every cue, every routine, every craving and reward, lies a deeper question. Who are you? Think of your life as a tapestry. Each morning you weave a new thread. The way you rise from bed, the words you speak to a stranger, the food you choose to eat, the moments you give to your work or your family. One thread on its own may seem fragile, unimportant, but woven together, day after day, they form the fabric of your character. Habits are not just what you do. They are who you are. Charles Duhigg shows us that when people change their habits, they are not merely altering behavior. They are reshaping their identities. A smoker who replaces cigarettes with running eventually stops saying, "I'm trying to quit." Instead, they begin to say, "I'm a runner now." That subtle shift in language marks a deeper transformation. The new identity becomes a shield, a compass, a reason to keep going when temptation returns. Organizations learn the same lesson. A company that shifts its habits doesn't just improve performance, it redefines itself. Alcoa stopped being a company that tolerated accidents and became a company that prized safety above all. Starbucks stopped being a chain plagued by customer complaints and became a place where employees practiced calm under fire. Identity changes, and the world notices. And what about you? Every time you repeat a routine, you cast a silent vote for the type of person you want to be. Each morning you make your bed, you vote for order. Each time you choose the salad over the fries, you vote for health. Each time you speak kindly when irritation rises, you vote for patience. One vote does not decide an election, and one action does not decide a life. But as the votes accumulate, the picture sharpens. Slowly, you become what you practice. This is why habits matter. Not because they are glamorous, not because they make headlines, but because they are the brushstrokes that paint the portrait of who you are. And every night, as you drift to sleep, you are living inside the canvas you have been painting all along. So as this story closes, let it linger in you. Habits are not destiny. They are choices, repeated until they carve pathways into your brain, until they form the invisible architecture of your life. You do not need to change everything at once. You need only change the loop, one thread in the tapestry, one vote for the self you wish to become. Tomorrow morning, when the sun spills across your room and you reach, without thinking, for your phone or your toothbrush or your shoes, pause. See the cue. Feel the craving. And then, choose the routine that writes the story you long to tell. Because in the end, the power of habit is nothing less than the power to decide who you will be. Decide who you will be. Decide who